I say to you this morning on Palm Sunday, when our church culture celebrates what would be remembered as the triumphant entry of Jesus as he gets ready for the cross, I want to ask you this morning up front, which Jesus do you know? I want to ask you, which Jesus do you personally know? Where would you find yourself in the crowd if you were there while Jesus was sharing his truth and love? Would you be one that are so widely recognized on Palm Sunday that was there cheering, "Hosanna, Hosanna," with the palm branches laying down? Or would you be one who was confused and contemplative? Would you be one that likes to be the devil's advocate, the contrarian? Or are you one that is absolutely convinced that Christ is King? Well, I say to you this morning, we will now walk through in the next 45 to 60 minutes, John chapter 7, John chapter 8, and John chapter 9. All of it. And we do it for this reason, I tell you up front, that God has made it very clear to me that so many of us, especially those that are comfortable in the church and have been religious for a long time, those of us that could answer the quiz well if it were laid out before us, I dare say most of us have never looked at this account in its totality. If you remember, we've been walking through this Gospel of John asking this question, do you know this Jesus? We opened up in the beginning. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, right? The Word dwelt among us. We said Jesus is Creator God. We went into John chapter 2 and we watched him clean house in the temple, literally empty the place. And we made note then that that was not a one and done deal. Jesus began his public ministry clearing out the temple, and he ends his public ministry going back and clearing it out again to make a point. The purity of his worship and his house matters. I asked you in John 3, do you know this Jesus that would go to a religious expert and say, you need to be born again? Did you know the Jesus of John 5 who became directly confrontational with the religious crowd? Do you know the Jesus of John 6 whose teaching was said to be so hard that his disciples followed him no more? Do you know the Jesus that brings truth to the table to both provide and divide those that hear? And I said to you, when you look at Jesus in the Bible, when he gets around the multitude or the crowds, he almost instantaneously begins to divide and thin the herd with his truth. I asked you, do you know this Jesus? My one purpose for this morning is to again bring before you this question: which Jesus do you serve? Which Jesus do you know? And here's my prayer. For those of us that could point to the passages that we're so familiar with from John 7, from John 8, and from John 9, that we would instead look at the totality of the passage. For you see, these chapters encapsulate one event. This is going to look at, this time, Jesus at the festival or the Feast of Shelters. And I want you to think about it even now. You no doubt have parts, if you know Christ and if you have been in the church, you have parts that you would say, oh yes, I love this part. Jesus, the light of the world. Jesus, the living water. Oh, Jesus, he heals the blind. Now I ask you, when we're done today, as you leave and in your quiet time, you ask yourself, did I know the Jesus that I saw today? Because here's the thing, so many people go kind of walking through the scriptures on lily pads of light and are not willing to walk through the whole truth. Because what you're going to find, I think, today is that there's a different side of Jesus than most of us know. You see, most people that were cheering, Hosanna, were the very ones that were later yelling, crucify him, crucify him. The palm branches that you see out and about this week in many ways represent a blasphemous misunderstanding. For you see, his entry was triumphant not because they were cheering him on, because they would cut his throat in just a few days. His entry was triumphant because he was fulfilling God's plan. He was walking in faithful obedience, and he was about to save you and me, Christian, on the cross.